Integrated Pest Management, or IPM, is a sustainable and environmentally friendly method to manage pests that affect resources that we care about. IPM has many benefits compared to traditional pest management strategies, which mainly rely on calendar-based chemical insecticide treatments to reduce pest populations. Both strategies aim to manage pest populations in an economically sound manner. However, IPM, in most cases, uses fewer chemical pesticides on the crop, which means fewer chemicals released into the environment. IPM focuses on an integration of different pest management tactics to control the target pest. Pesticides are applied sparingly and only when necessary. IPM incorporates non-chemical control methods with chemical ones so that the entire program provides economical management with the same or better results than traditional chemical applications alone. The integration of various pest management tactics results in reduced pesticide applications, which can lower pesticide contamination of air and groundwater, as well as protect non-target and beneficial insect species. Lower pesticide use as part of an IPM system also slows down the development of pesticide resistance, which we will discuss later in this module. As IPM is based on a combination of various control tactics, modification of the system will be necessary depending on the managed insect, the crop, and the market. IPM programs are therefore heavily reliant on inspection, monitoring, and surveillance activities, and a good understanding of a pest's ecological system. Techniques used in IPM are designed to economically manage pest populations over the long term in a sustainable manner. These tactics aim to inhibit pest populations from becoming established and to prevent established pest populations from reaching critical levels. When control measures are necessary, the tactics used attempt to control the pests with environmental sustainability in mind. This is referred to as the four-tiered IPM implementation approach. The first step in integrated pest management begins with the evaluation and establishment of economic thresholds for a target pest or a complex of pests in a managed ecosystem. IPM emphasizes the management of identified pests to maintain populations at non-critical levels. Eradication of the pest is rarely the goal in IPM. An economic threshold, also called an action threshold, is the point at which a grower needs to take action against a particular pest species. On this diagram, we see that in most cases, there are levels of a pest population that can be tolerated and won't cause economic losses to growers. As the pest population increases, however, there comes a point where the pests will cause significant economic losses if they are not managed in some way, and the potential economic loss outweighs the cost of management. So, the growers should apply some kind of management strategy. If they do not, then the pest population will most likely reach the economic injury level, which is the level of pests that will cause economic losses, and the growers will start to lose money. These thresholds are established through a significant amount of research and require years of study to learn how to best monitor the pest species, how to check for and measure crop damage, and how to correlate the number of insects or evidence of damage with overall economic loss. This is no easy task. However, when it can be established, it is extremely useful and serves to inform managers when control actions, such as spraying insecticides, become necessary by accounting for ecological, biological, and economic factors. Depending on the pest species, an action threshold can be as low as one individual if the insect is invasive or poses a serious risk to agriculture or medical health. The second step in IPM involves the identification and monitoring of pest populations. Successful IPM programs are based on routine monitoring efforts before, during, and after the implementation of control measures. This includes identifications of pest species and monitoring the crop or resource for insect activity or damage. Correct pest identification is essential to determine appropriate preventative measures for a resource and when and if management decisions need to be undertaken. Thorough monitoring efforts should detect the presence of a pest species at low population densities before they reach critical levels that can harm the resource being managed. In many cases, the populations of the target insect pest in a managed ecosystem is directly assessed using a variety of sampling tools. This allows managers to identify when pest population levels become troublesome and pinpoint areas vulnerable to pest damage. Pest managers will then be able to implement control methods in a timely manner, which are often most effective when pest population levels are low. Monitoring also allows growers and managers to evaluate the efficiency of preventative and control methods that have been implemented. Monitoring provides real-time information so that IPM strategies can be adapted to current conditions. There are a variety of ways in which insects can be sampled. In some instances, the easiest way to sample for the presence and density of insect populations is to manually inspect the affected crop for the insect or its associated damage. This method can be efficient because 1 to 2 samples at peak insect activity can provide the manager with enough information to form a decision on control. If insects are found and recorded, some photographs are often taken and a few specimens are usually collected to confirm their identity. This technique, which solely uses visual observation, is often referred to as in situ sampling. In situ sampling is effective for insects that are not active flyers, or those difficult to catch with traps, as well as for insects that are easy to find or cause obvious damage to plants. Another active sampling method used to monitor for the presence of pestiferous insects is sweep netting. The manager uses a net to sweep through the vegetation and sample arthropods on the crop plant. A sweep net is the most widely used device to collect insects. Like in situ methods, sweep netting is good for quick, short-term monitoring as it is not time-consuming and may only require one visit to the sampling site. When sampling larger vegetation, the knockdown method is sometimes used. This method is similar to in situ counting, with the difference being that insects are removed from the plant before being counted. A tray or other receptacle of known size is placed under the plant or branch to be sampled, and the plant is struck to dislodge any insects so that they may fall into the container below. Sometimes gaseous chemicals can be used, often in combination with striking the plant, to help facilitate the knockdown. While these manual inspection methods are quick and efficient monitoring tools, research to establish economic thresholds based on the number of insects per sample is required before they can be incorporated into a pest management system. Traps that attract and retain insects can be useful tools to monitor the presence of insects in a managed ecosystem. In well-studied systems, the number of insects captured in monitoring traps can also be used to assess the population density of the target pest. Some traps are baited with attractive visual or chemical cues to enhance attraction of the target pest and to reduce bycatch of non-target arthropods. Lures treated with synthetic chemicals that mimic aggregation or sex pheromones of the target pest can be used to bait monitoring traps. Pheromone lures are extremely sensitive and specific, so in cases where the insect pheromone is known, this is an extremely useful tool. Growers monitoring for moth and beetle pests widely use pheromone traps, which are used for pests present in crops such as apples, peaches, canola, wheat, and corn. The type of trap used in monitoring systems will vary with the target insect and managed ecosystem. Trap color and the position of the trap in the environment can influence the number of insects that encounter the trap. Funnel traps to attract bark beetles can be long, segmented, and black or brown to mimic the shape of a tree trunk. Yellow sticky traps are designed to attract a variety of potential insect pests, including aphids and whiteflies. The capacity of the trap will dictate the number of visits required by the manager to monitor the trap and therefore the cost of the program. Other types of traps may lure in certain insects using light, heat, or carbon dioxide rather than pheromone lures, as is the case for bedbug traps. An important element of regular monitoring is to maintain accurate long-term records that can be used for future reference. Data collected on the capture of the target insect throughout the growing season over several years may be used to predict the timing of insect activities using degree day models. This practice not only requires monitoring the pest populations, but data on environmental and climatic conditions as well. To understand the importance of regular monitoring practices, let's look at a case study of an invasive species in North America. The emerald ash borer, Agrillus planipennis, is a beetle species native to Asia. The emerald ash borer, as the name suggests, bores into ash tree hosts and feeds within the tree. They are a member of the wood-boring beetle family, the Buprestidae. Emerald ash borer adults are slender beetles measuring around 1 centimeter in length, with distinctive metallic green coloration. In their native range, these insects do little damage to their ash hosts because they are only present in low numbers. In North America, where they are considered invasive, emerald ash borers have killed tens of millions of native ash trees. The emerald ash borer was first detected in 2002 in the northeastern United States and central Canada. Since then, it has spread across a wide geographic area, causing substantial economic and ecological damage. These insects cause such severe damage because they have few effective natural enemies and plenty of hosts, as is common with invasive species. Additionally, native ash tree species are susceptible to beetle attacks because they have not co-evolved with the herbivore. The cost of treatment, removal, and replacement of attacked trees over the next 30 years is estimated to be as high as 2 billion Canadian dollars. The emerald ash borer is believed to have arrived in North America in untreated solid wood packaging material originating from Asia. Monitoring the spread of these insects is difficult because visual surveys are not effective. Tree infestation is usually not noticed until the ash tree is already dying. Research to develop monitoring tools to detect range expansion in the invasive range has revealed that pheromone trapping, sampling branches to detect asymptomatic infestations, and employing computer models can help predict patterns of spread. Preventing the spread of this pest through monitoring and trapping practices is currently the most important tool in managing emerald ash borers. The third step involved in integrated pest management is prevention. Prevention can be considered the first line of defense and is achieved by a variety of methods. Regulatory practices, in particular, can be considered a form of preventative measure that can inhibit the pest population from establishing. For example, government agencies often monitor and inspect goods being imported into a country or region to reduce the entry or spread of pests. These regular inspections can be combined with quarantine regulations against certain pest species. Quarantine is a legal tool used to prevent the introduction of potentially damaging and destructive pests to new areas from regions where they are known to occur. Since global trade enables many pests to travel from one location to another, certain plants or material are banned from crossing specific borders. For example, before produce is allowed to be transported, it has to be proven that the produce is free from specific quarantine pests for the destination country. Goods will be held within quarantine zones, such as shipyards and airports, until proven to be free of pests. In the state of Washington in the United States, there is a quarantine zone for apple maggot fly Regalitas pulmonella, where homegrown or foraged fruit are not allowed to be transported from inside the quarantine zone to any area outside the quarantine zone. Apple is an important crop in Washington, and the apple maggot fly is an extremely damaging fly, so the aim is to prevent the fly from expanding its range to all of the apple-producing regions in Washington. Quarantined goods can be inspected visually or using a range of techniques and technologies developed to monitor for specific pests. These can include traps and sentinel trees that attract specific pests for monitoring, or technologies and even animals that can examine goods directly for known pests. Monitoring by citizens can expand surveys beyond the range feasible for regulatory agencies, while genetic tools can provide rapid and accurate identification of captured species. Different techniques will be used in different areas. For example, citizen science will be useless at points of entry, but valuable around infested areas, such as the quarantine zone around Washington. Goods found to be infested with quarantine pests are usually destroyed under controlled conditions to eliminate the possibility of establishment of the quarantine pest within a region. Prevention can also be practiced at a more local level within a managed ecosystem. Preventative actions can include sanitation or removal of infested plant parts from the managed ecosystem. In these cases, infested material is removed and destroyed. Areas can be sealed to reduce access to insects through the installation of pest barriers, like nets that exclude insects larger than a specific size. Other preventative practices can include choosing crop varieties that are resistant or unappealing to the target pest, or manipulation of the environment to reduce attraction and establishment of the pest in the managed system. Many of these preventative tactics will be expanded upon in the next module when we discuss cultural control. Education and outreach can also be considered a preventative strategy. Information can influence people's behaviors and decisions, which can in turn play a part in pest management. The fourth and final step in IPM is control, and this will be the focus of the remainder of this module and Module 10. Control methods are usually implemented when monitoring and identification programs indicate that action thresholds have been breached and preventative approaches are no longer effective. Prior to implementation, all control methods employed must first be assessed based on economics and efficiency, human health risks, and risks to the environment. IPM uses many different tactics simultaneously and synergistically to provide effective results at low ecological risk. The tactics can include insecticide use, cultural control, and biological control. We will explore these methods in the following lessons and in the next module. Before we move on to our next topic, let's talk to Mike Jenkins, a technician at the City of Edmonton Pest Management Lab, to hear about some pest control programs currently being implemented in the city. Hear more from Mike at the end of this module, where he will discuss the details of control programs used in the City of Edmonton and talk about how we deal with the most annoying pest in our city, the mosquito.
I'm the Pest Management Coordinator for the City of Edmonton. So the lab itself is mostly involved in surveillance for different insect pests and tree diseases. So we take a look for a lot of different things, in particular invasive species that can potentially threaten our urban forest. So we have a lot of surveillance programs and traps that are up looking for those specific insects, especially ones that we don't have yet, but pose a significant threat to our urban forest. We also monitor some of the conditions, things like rainfall and moisture conditions that can lead to the development of some of these pests. In particular, a large part of our program is monitoring for mosquitoes. So we are monitoring both the rainfall that can develop into the mosquitoes. We have programs actually tracking ground moisture levels, so we can help to predict when we're going to get large numbers of mosquitoes. So the primary thing we're doing is early detection and rapid response planning. So we have a number of trapping programs that are specifically looking for the insects that we don't have yet, things like emerald ash borer and Asian longhorn beetle, insects that can come in and threaten our urban forest. And so we want to find out when those have arrived basically as soon as possible and start control measures on those right away. Here. So emerald ash borer is a really big one. So this is a pest that has basically wiped out ash trees in a lot of eastern United States and parts of eastern Canada, and has been spreading since then. About 60% of our street trees are green ash. So we're tremendously vulnerable to this particular insect. Due is a lot of surveillance for Dutch elm disease. So most of the trees that we have on our boulevards that aren't green ash are American elm. And American elm has largely been wiped out from most of eastern United States, most of eastern Canada by Dutch elm disease. We do have the beetle that can transport the fungus from tree to tree. We've had the beetle since about the mid-90s in fairly low numbers. So we do a lot of monitoring for where those populations of beetles are, what their numbers are like each year. We also do surveys of all of our trees, all of the elm trees in the city each year, looking for signs and symptoms of Dutch elm disease. And if we see any signs, we'll actually take a culture from those trees, submit them to a laboratory, and find out exactly what species of fungus are in those. So far we've been lucky. We still have not found Dutch elm disease, but we're again hoping to keep it that way. Other problematic species we have, past few years we've had an insect called European elm scale has moved in on those same elm trees. So this is another invasive species. We've had detections of it multiple times over the years, but typically it kind of blooms for a few years, and then our harsh winters pretty much kill them off. The last few years, our winters have not been terribly harsh. We've had a series of mild winters, and the European elm scale has blossomed. Now, large number of our elm trees have really large infestations of this European elm scale. So for established pests, we do have a number of insects that are around that aren't always pests. They're part of the natural population of insects in the city. And we do monitor some of those ones as well, because usually on a cyclical basis, they kind of rise up in their populations, become a pest, and some of them may reach the point where we would actually want to do management against those. So things like forest ant caterpillar is a pretty big one. Used to have cyclical boom and busts in that population, and about every 10 to 12 years we'd have a huge outbreak of forest ant caterpillar. So the biggest problem we have with our urban environment, in particular in Edmonton, is our lack of diversity. So in particular our street trees, we have very, very few species, and even those are just a very small variety of trees that have a specific form and everything that's really good for boulevards, but it leaves us really, really vulnerable in terms of genetic diversity when we get a pest or a disease moving in. With our program, there is a lot of monitoring. There's a huge diversity in the number of things that we're monitoring. So we're looking at all kinds of different conditions, different species, things like that. When it comes to the actual control programs, those are usually much more focused. There's usually only a few different species that we're going after at any one time. Depends exactly on what stage they're in. For a vast majority of these insects, we don't do any control at all. We may do some monitoring, watch their populations, see where they're going. If possible, we'll enhance plant health care, do some fertilizing or watering of those trees to try to help them fend those off. Or in some cases, we'll even look for biological controls. My favorite insect, well, I don't know if there's one specific one, but in general, the dragonflies are among my favorites. Really agile, fantastic aerial predators, and eat mosquitoes as well.
In this lesson, we introduced the purpose of Integrated Pest Management, or IPM, and examined its four-tiered implementation approach. Now that you have a better understanding of IPM, we will begin to explore in detail the major control tactics involved in the approach, starting with insecticide use.